Colonel Emma Brooks enters a small supermarket on a tranquil weekend afternoon in Austin, Texas, dressed in a casual white shirt, blue jeans, and sneakers. She seamlessly blends in with the crowd of everyday shoppers, presenting a modest appearance. No one could have anticipated that this woman had dedicated her entire career to protecting the nation, commanding hundreds of soldiers in combat. Emma relishes quiet moments, selecting essential items by herself after a long, stressful day. However, that tranquility is soon disrupted by an apparently innocuous act that unveils the true nature of humanity. At the end of the aisle, a tall man in a police uniform, Officer Paul Smith, inadvertently dropped a packet of noodles and a bottle of soda onto the floor. Emma paused, observing as Paul glanced at the mess before casually walking away, leaving the disarray he had created. As a soldier, Emma is trained to focus on details and uphold accountability in all her actions. Paul's careless behavior and apathetic demeanor made it impossible for her to stay silent. Emma stepped forward, her voice calm yet clear. "Excuse me, sir, you just dropped a few items. Perhaps you should pick them up to avoid inconveniencing others." Rather than apologizing, Paul cast a cold stare at Emma, as if she were unworthy of his attention. With a condescending smile, he responded, "Who do you think you are to tell me what to do? I don't have time to concern myself with trivial matters." Confronted with that arrogant attitude, Emma remained composed, her eyes shining with seriousness as she replied, "As a police officer, you have a duty to set an example for the community." Of the approach. Picking up your things is not only courteous, but also demonstrates respect for everyone. Yet Emma's words did not prompt Paul to acknowledge his responsibilities. Instead, he responded with sarcasm, continuing to hurl insulting remarks. What began as a minor incident had now escalated the atmosphere in the supermarket to one of tension. The crowd began to take notice of the confrontation. Emma could clearly sense the curious, timid gazes surrounding her, but she stood tall, ready to defend her viewpoint against any prejudice or offensive remarks. Paul Smith looked at Emma again, his eyes filled with disdain. He stood there, tall and self-satisfied, with no intention of heeding her advice. Internally, Emma felt a surge of anger, but with the bravery of a seasoned officer, she expertly managed her emotions. Her years on the battlefield had taught her that composure and decisiveness could resolve the most stressful situations. She took a deep breath, maintaining a calm yet firm tone. "Sir, this is not merely a trivial issue. You are in a police uniform, and everyone here is observing you. Performing a simple act like picking something up is not only a citizen's duty, but also a representation of your profession." Her words served as a warning. But instead of listening, Paul smirked, his laughter dripping with mockery. Shocked. "Listen," he said, his voice laced with sarcasm. "You seem to think you know a lot about the responsibilities of a police officer, but you don't truly understand anything. This isn't worth worrying about, and frankly, you should mind your own business." Emma felt the curious gazes from those around her. Some had begun to pull out their phones to record the incident, but she remained undistracted. Inside, she was furious. Not just at Paul's irresponsibility, but also at the injustice she and many others had endured. This insult was not merely personal. It symbolized a broader spectrum of societal prejudices she had fought against throughout her career. Emma stood firm, her eyes filled with determination as she locked her gaze on Paul. "You're misjudging the wrong person," she said, her voice soft yet powerful. "You may not realize it, but your behavior now will have repercussions. Not just for me, but for you as well." Paul scoffed, disbelieving her words. But beneath Emma's calm exterior, anger and resolve simmered. She understood that this was not just a minor dispute, but a pivotal moment to advocate for herself and the principles she held dear. Confronted with Paul's defiant demeanor and insulting remarks, Emma felt her anger rise, but chose not to let it overwhelm her composure. Her gaze was icy as she met his eyes, unwavering. Paul remained there, sporting a sarcastic grin and eyes filled with contempt, as if waiting for Emma to lose control. Instead of responding with rage, she opted to leverage the reasoning and courage of an experienced commander. "I'm not here to argue," Emma stated, her voice calm yet authoritative. "I merely wish to remind you that your actions impact others and reflect on who you are as a police officer. You should understand your responsibilities better than anyone." Emma's incisive words drew the surrounding crowd's attention. Some shoppers halted their activities altogether to observe the unfolding situation. Feeling the pressure of the gazes upon him, Paul resorted to arrogance to mask his embarrassment. He laughed, the sound reverberating through the narrow aisle of the supermarket. Grace. Responsibility? Paul sneered, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Who are you to lecture me? Just a mediocre woman, nothing more. Don't think you have the right to stand here and tell me what to do. You know nothing about my job. Paul's sexist and racist rhetoric struck a heavy blow to Emma's self-esteem. But rather than allowing her emotions to take control, she inhaled deeply, keeping her gaze steady. She recognized that her actions at this moment could exemplify the distinction between her and Paul. A true leader versus an abuser of power. I don't need you to understand who I am, Emma responded, her voice calm yet weighty. What I want you to grasp is that everyone in this society deserves to be treated with respect, and if you cannot do that, then you are the one unworthy of the uniform you wear. Paul laughed louder, his derision palpable. What do you think you can do to me? I'm a policeman, and the law is on my side. You're just an ordinary woman of color. You should know your place before you get yourself into trouble. His words were not merely an insult, but also a provocation. Yet Emma did not flinch. She felt the tense silence enveloping the entire supermarket, with every gaze fixed on her every move. This was no longer a personal dispute. It was a moment for her to demonstrate that calmness and resolve triumph over arrogance and prejudice. Emma stood tall, her shoulders squared as if confronting an enemy on the battlefield rather than a man in a police uniform. Her eyes shone with unwavering determination, and despite Paul's mocking words, the crowd began to quiet down, as if they were all holding their breath in anticipation of her next action. She took a step forward, unafraid, her voice calm yet sharp as a blade. You may perceive me as anyone, but remember that arrogance and disdain for others cannot obscure your moral failings. I am not here to vie for power with you, but I will not allow you to continue to exploit it. Paul frowned, his confidence beginning to waver in the face of Emma's resolute demeanor. He scrutinized her, searching for any hint of insecurity or fear, but all he found was a woman as unyielding as a bronze statue. The crowd was now fully engaged in the confrontation, with some even raising their phones to capture every moment. Don't be noble in front of me, Paul spat, attempting to regain control of the situation. You're nothing but a troublemaker. If I wanted to, I could have you removed from here immediately. Emma did not smile, but the corners of her mouth twitched slightly, reflecting a chilling calmness. If you believe your authority allows you to act like that, then I will let the law address your misconceptions. Do not presume that I will be intimidated. The atmosphere in the supermarket became charged, the tension palpable as the two stood face to face. Paul, with his imposing and aggressive demeanor, confronted Emma, a woman who, though not tall or uniformed, radiated undeniable authority through her posture and gaze. You may continue to insult me, but remember that I am not here alone, Emma stated, her voice steady yet impactful. There are many witnesses present, and if you think you can use words to belittle me, you are mistaken. I am not standing here to defend my personal honor. I am here to uphold the values I have dedicated my life to preserving. The entire supermarket seemed engulfed in absolute silence. The crowd, though silent, conveyed their support through their eyes. Paul, while attempting to maintain a tough facade, could not conceal his embarrassment as he realized that the situation was spiraling out of his control. Emma stood firm, a beacon of resolve amidst a storm of injustice and prejudice. In the face of escalating tension, while Paul began to falter, Emma remained surprisingly composed under the scrutiny and occasional fear of the onlookers. She understood that her every action and word at this moment not only impacted herself, but also represented justice and righteousness. Paul advanced, his voice growing harsher and more aggressive. I warn you, don't escalate this situation. I'm the police, and I have the authority to handle you right here. His words rang out, but instead of intimidating Emma, they only fueled her determination. Emma slowly retrieved her phone from her pocket, not in a panic, but with a decisive air, as if she had anticipated this moment. You have your rights, she said, her voice soft yet as sharp as steel. And I have my rights too. Let's see whose side the law will favor. She quickly dialed a number, her voice composed when the call connected. Hello. I need assistance at the central supermarket. There's a police officer who is abusing his power and threatening people. I require the appropriate personnel to come here immediately." Paul was taken aback, his eyes widening as he realized that the situation was slipping from his grasp. The crowd began to murmur loudly, and some individuals ceased recording to contact the authorities. Emma, despite standing amidst chaos, maintained her calm demeanor. "What do you think you're doing?" Paul shouted, taking another step toward Emma. But she did not retreat, her gaze fixed on him without a trace of fear. "I'm doing what you should be doing, defending fairness and accountability," she asserted, her voice firm yet steady. At that moment, the sound of police sirens echoed outside, signaling the arrival of help. The crowd parted to allow the officers entry. Emma slowly pointed at Paul, her gaze unwavering. "This is the individual you need to consider. All of his actions have been documented and fully witnessed." Paul, now stripped of his arrogance, began to feel embarrassed. The confidence that once adorned his face was replaced by confusion and anxiety. Meanwhile, Emma stood still, calm as if she had anticipated all the developments. She recognized that her intelligence and bravery had enabled her to overcome this challenge, not only to protect herself, but also to demonstrate that justice must always be served fairly. When the supermarket doors opened and Mayor Andrew Preston stepped in, the already tense atmosphere grew even more serious. He entered with a commanding presence, his sharp gaze scanning the crowd before settling on Emma. His strides were purposeful, like a man arriving to rectify wrongs. Paul, who had been bewildered moments earlier, was now completely rigid. The usual arrogance on his face vanished, replaced by bewilderment and fear. He lowered his head, stammering as he attempted to explain, "Mr. Mayor, this is just a misunderstanding. I didn't mean anything, it's just that she—" But Andrew interrupted him, his voice quiet yet authoritative. "Be quiet," he commanded, cutting off Paul. "I came here due to an urgent call from Colonel Emma Anderson, a woman I hold in high regard. Your behavior has been reported and witnessed by many. Do not think your flimsy excuses can erase your actions." Emma remained still, her eyes fixed on Andrew, feeling a slight sense of relief knowing that justice was about to be served, yet her expression remained resolute, a reminder that this battle was not over. Andrew approached her, his expression softening. "Colonel Anderson, I hope you are not injured or harmed in any way. This behavior is unacceptable and will be dealt with thoroughly." Emma nodded, her voice calm yet assertive. "I'm fine. But this isn't merely about me. It's about those in positions of power needing to be held accountable for their actions. If I hadn't stood up today, many others would have faced unfair treatment." Andrew turned to Paul, his gaze icy. "You have abused your power, insulted a high-ranking military officer, and lost the public's trust in the police force. You do not deserve to wear this uniform." A female witness from the crowd stepped forward, handing her phone with a video recording of the incident. Andrew glanced at it, his expression growing even more serious. "This behavior is intolerable," he declared, then turned to the newly arrived police officers. "Strip him of his weapons and insignia immediately. An investigation will be initiated, and he will face all appropriate consequences." Paul, now completely devastated, was left speechless as the officers executed Andrew's orders. The crowd outside began to applaud, paying tribute to Emma and the mayor's decisive action. Though Emma sought no accolades, she felt a profound sense of relief when Andrew turned to her. "Colonel Anderson, this city needs individuals like you to remind us of responsibility and integrity. I apologize for what you endured." Emma nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Mayor. I just hope that these events will lead to real change." Andrew nodded, his expression solemn yet sympathetic. "We will ensure that." Emma exited the supermarket, stepping into the sunlight, her heart lighter. Yet she knew that the fight for fairness and accountability would never cease, and she was prepared to continue that battle not only for herself, but for all those who could not advocate for themselves. After being stripped of his badge and weapon on the scene, Paul Smith was taken away in heavy silence, his face stripped of its former arrogance, now replaced by fear and confusion. As the police car departed from the supermarket, the crowd lingered, their chatter and critical gazes following him like a haunting shadow. At the police station, Paul was immediately questioned. Video evidence, along with witness testimonies, rendered his position indefensible. The head of the police department, informed by Mayor Andrew Preston, stated that Paul's behavior was a stain on the entire force. That same day, he was officially suspended from duty
and faced a thorough investigation.
The news spread rapidly, not only within the local community but also in the media. Videos of Paul abusing his authority and treating Emma Anderson disrespectfully were shared millions of times, igniting a wave of outrage. Individuals who had previously been mistreated by Paul began to come forward, sharing their experiences, worsening his predicament. Once proud of his status and power, Paul now faced inevitable downfall. Those who once knew him began to distance themselves, and former colleagues expressed their disappointment. In the small house where he lived alone, Paul sat with his head bowed, clearly feeling the burden of his mistakes. Meanwhile, Emma Anderson continued her life with humility and resolve. She did not seek the spotlight, but received countless expressions of gratitude and admiration from the community. Her actions not only compelled Paul to face the consequences, but also ignited a broader conversation about accountability and ethics in law enforcement. Ultimately, Paul Smith faced not only the loss of his job but also legal charges, including abuse of power and threats with a weapon. During subsequent trials, he bowed his head, devoid of the arrogance he once exhibited. This was the price he paid for forgetting that power comes with responsibility and that injustice has no place in a just society. Following the shocking incident, Emma Anderson's life did not revert to its previous state. The story of her courage quickly spread, becoming a symbol for those who dared to confront injustice. The press, media, and even activists hailed Emma as a modern-day hero. But for Emma, she did not view herself as a hero. She merely saw it as the duty of a soldier and a citizen to safeguard the value of equity. In the weeks that followed, the impact of the event began to manifest. Local police forces came under closer scrutiny, and changes in recruitment and training processes were enacted. Seminars on accountability and ethics in law enforcement were held, with Emma invited as a keynote speaker. Standing before hundreds, she shared her story not to receive applause but to remind everyone that power is only meaningful when wielded to protect, not to oppress. As for Paul Smith, his career was effectively over. The public trial not only resulted in his temporary loss of freedom, but also stripped him of his honor forever. The community turned its back on him, and those who once supported him could not forgive his abuse of authority. In the shadows of his life, Paul began to comprehend the bitter lesson that pride and injustice not only harm others, but also lead to self-destruction. Emma, however, did not stop at personal narratives. She became an inspiration for numerous movements, advocating for justice and equality. Articles and videos documenting her actions circulated widely, encouraging individuals not to fear standing up to injustice. Nevertheless, Emma maintained her simple and consistent demeanor. She continued to dedicate herself to the military, as a living testament that true strength lies not in power but in integrity and the courage to do what is right. Each time she reflected on the incident, she felt no regret, only a quiet pride, knowing her actions had contributed to positive change within society. For her, this story was not an ending, but a reminder that the fight for justice always requires solidarity and bravery, and she was prepared to confront any further challenges in her quest to uphold the values she believed in. Emma Anderson's legacy is documented not only in newspapers and videos capturing the moment she stood resolute amidst a storm of criticism and threats, but also in profound changes in societal perceptions of justice and accountability. Her unwavering steps in the fight against injustice sparked a wave of inspiration, affecting not only the military but also the community, particularly for women and people of color who frequently face discrimination and marginalization. Each time they hear stories about Emma, individuals remember not only her courageous actions in the supermarket, but also a resilient woman willing to confront all injustice at great personal cost. The workshops she participated in have inspired many, especially those within law enforcement, to uphold dignity and respect for human rights in all situations. The reforms in police recruitment and training processes that Emma helped initiate are beginning to yield results, as more officers become increasingly aware of their responsibilities and professional ethics. However, Emma's legacy does not rest solely on reforms or social acknowledgement. It is in her daily life that she has become a role model for the younger generation, who look to her for guidance on how to face challenges with composure, patience, and unwavering determination. Emma does not seek fame, but the respect she garners from everyone, from her colleagues to the community, demonstrates the power that integrity can create. Despite encountering difficulties and challenges throughout her career, Emma has consistently stood her ground. She recognizes that legacy is not something that can be quantified through fame or accolades, but rather through the values one leaves in the hearts of others. For Emma, her legacy is the change she has ignited, the solid steps the next generation will follow. Generations willing to advocate for justice and unafraid to confront injustice. Thus, regardless of how many years pass, Emma Anderson's legacy will endure, not only in seminars and speeches, but in the hearts of those who continue to fight for a more just and equitable society. Following the incident with Paul Smith, Emma Anderson did not stop at resolving a personal issue, but set herself a broader mission. She realized that injustice is not an isolated occurrence, but a widespread problem that needs to be addressed at its roots. Each day, every story she hears from oppressed and abused individuals deepens her sense of responsibility in her actions. She understands that relying solely on exceptional individuals for change is insufficient. There must be a widespread movement where everyone can voice their concerns and advocate for their rights. Emma began to engage in campaigns for action, inviting people, especially those in law enforcement, to reconsider their roles and responsibilities in upholding justice. She organizes meetings, workshops, and media campaigns to empower each individual to confront injustice rather than remain silent. Each of us has the right to say no to abuse of power, and each of us can make a difference, is a slogan she frequently emphasizes in her speeches. Emma's outreach not only involves those in the military, but also extends to civilians who feel marginalized or voiceless in society. She encourages them not to fear authority, as justice is a fundamental right that cannot be trampled upon. Emma's demeanor at this time transformed from caution to strong determination. She realizes that every action, every call to action, generates a ripple effect of power, and that is the path to long-term, sustainable change. Emma is fighting not only for herself, but for those who cannot speak up for themselves, striving for the fairer society she envisions. The call to action is not easy, but Emma is ready to confront the challenge. She acknowledges that this is a long journey, and that not everyone will accompany her. But she believes in the strength of solidarity and the capacity of each individual to effect change if they persist in their fight. With each step, Emma has been transforming her struggle into a powerful movement, a reminder that justice must be defended not just for individuals but for the entire community.